Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Devasia mentality talk. I initially had a completely different version of how I was going to approach today's topic, and that started off as a review that somehow devolved into a 7-page rant about the things I don't like about the game. It didn't take long for me to realize this was a bad way to approach this talk, because I did genuinely enjoy the game overall. So I'll sum up those issues quickly. Oh, and to clarify the gameplay footage, I installed the Sonic mod for the game, and I completely forgot how the heck you're supposed to turn it off, so bear with me. This isn't an actual Sonic game, I swear. I don't like the story. While not awful in its way, it just doesn't jive with me in the way it's presented. The fact that most of the major plot beats until endgame is all just backstory for characters from previous games. The fact that none of it has any impact on Spark himself, and without spoiling it, the ending, just the entirety of the ending really bothered me. But to contextualize, the issue is more so with my personal tastes. It's one of those things where I acknowledge it has an audience. I'm sure we'll appreciate what happens, but I'm not that audience. Also, I'm a jaded and cynical bastard, so what do I know, huh? Now, on to gameplay, and once again, just summing up my dislikes real quick. The first most obvious and most universal complaint I see is the fall damage being added to the game. It's not just unwelcome, at least not completely, but it's weird the way it works. When Spark goes into free fall, a warning indicator appears letting you know when you touch down you're gonna get hurt. Okay, fair enough. But it instantly kills you before you even touch the ground if you fall for a certain distance. That just makes no damn sense. It's not supposed to be the fall that kills you, it's the sudden stop at the end. If you pass the terminal velocity threshold and couldn't save yourself after that before going splat, that'd be one thing. But the game insists that you perform a saving maneuver before you get to that point, or you'll just have a sudden mid-air heart attack. Now, this isn't a big hindrance for most of the game, though you may come across a few vertically inclined level designs that test your perception of the problem. It's around the end game where the fall damage issue becomes abundantly clear. With that in mind, I kind of understand why the fall damage was implemented, as you could otherwise skip the entire level. Though given a couple of speedrun videos I've come across, that's not entirely outside the realm of possibility anyway, so oops. I said I wanted to make this short, and that was a whole paragraph. Combat is the other issue I have, and perceptions on this front are a lot more mixed. Spark 1 and 2 didn't have the deepest combat systems, primarily coming across as a button mash fest of vaguely different flavors depending on your Jester power at the moment. Spark 3 does away with these powers for the most part, but still opts to expand the combat capabilities of Spark to be more akin to games like the old God of War and Devil May Cry. Two game series that I've never been inclined to play, and quite frankly just doesn't mix well with the high-speed action platforming. It makes stuff like boss battles a bit more engaging, but at the end of the day, the cross of gameplay styles does not flow well in my eyes. Thankfully, the core gameplay of high-speed action platforming takes up the majority of the game's time investment, and feels like a marked improvement over 2's already well-refined mechanics. The controls are much the same as they were in the second game, with things like the homing attack feeling a bit snappier, but no less problematic with regards to targeting things that are off-screen. Sidestepping this for a moment though, since the power-ups from the previous games are only present in a greatly reduced manner, Spark's move pool is instead given permanent expansions through the shop, with added combat and movement techniques to help bolster his capabilities. One of these is the Jester swipe, otherwise known to Sonic veterans as the light speed dash. When coming to a line of bits, you press the button to instantly zip through them and pick up speed. The problem is that this is mapped to the same button as the homing attack. Coupled with the aforementioned problem with the homing attack, this now reintroduces a long-standing issue Sonic Adventure 2 players will be painfully familiar with. Multiple context-sensitive actions tied to the same button. And wouldn't you know it, the game always tends to prefer the homing attack in these instances. To contextualize, this is mostly just a sore point and not really anything that ruins the experience. Just be aware that as fun as using the light dashes to get quick speed boosts, it has complications. Although to be fair, that's not entirely something that is foreign to Sonic games that use this technique anyway. Of course, if you know what you're doing, the homing attack can be just as ubiquitous at getting a big speed boost since there's a semi-intended technique in the game called the magnet dash, where if you push the dash button at the right time while homing in on an enemy or large bits, you'll get a huge burst of speed all at once, and I have seen some extraordinary speedruns take advantage of this in ways I can't begin to replicate. The game also features rail grinding, like all post-SA2 Sonic games, and, well, it's certainly not awful. There are a few oddities with how you pick up momentum and rail switch, but it's easy to get used to. Why did you have to make a level that's so clearly inspired by Rail Canyon? Even the music sounds the same. Listen. Also, am I the only one who thinks Shadow the Hedgehog with the style and look of Protest City? Since we're on the subject, the soundtrack is, once again, another big hit with a ton of real fire jams, courtesy of returning composers from the previous games, and some new talent added to the Spark series. And if you're a fan of Freedom Planet, some tracks might have a familiar sound to you. I should note, though, there are no new major vocal tracks in the game like the main boss theme and final boss of Spark 2, which I never got to experience during my LP of the game because they played it before the proper final boss track was implemented. So I'll give you a sample here.
Don't wanna save the day, doing it for the friends I've lost along the way. Leave it all behind, pushing the pain aside. The reason that our fight comes down to more than pride. Leave it all behind.
This has just put the biggest smile on my face when I learned about it after the fact. And the end credits to Spark 3 is basically a custom song remix made for Friday Night Funkin'. That was unexpected. Now, I think it's pretty unsurprising that this game takes a lot of inspiration from Sonic games for the way it plays, with a lot of folks drawing comparison to the Sonic Adventure games in particular. I'm not exactly sure just saying it's like an evolution of the Sonic Adventure style is a particularly clear praise regarding the game. Not because it's wrong, but because saying that doesn't genuinely quantify the exact qualities the games share. I mean, there are obvious elements to point to, like the fact there's some driving segments in the game, all the kart sub-games in the Sonic Adventure titles, and of course, rail grinding as a whole was an element when SA2 came around. There are multiple characters to play as. Sort of. And by sort of, I mean that they play almost exactly like Spark himself, where the Sonic Adventure games gave them different styles and objectives. Beyond that, though, I feel like it takes a bit of work to really explain the similarities in the nature of the gameplay itself to a layman who doesn't understand why there are those of us who love how Sonic Adventure games handled, more specifically, Sonic's, and by extension Shadow's, gameplay. Sonic Adventure was the Blue Blur's first full-on foray into the third dimension following the 2D classic games of Sonic 1 through Sonic and Knuckles. Those classic games set an interesting standard for 2D platformers in the way they handled speed and momentum physics, and Sonic Adventure does its best to translate that into the third dimension. It's not super well refined, but by God, when you know how to work with it, there are so many tricks you can pull off. Especially with the level design of the game having so few restrictions, meaning sometimes the prescribed paths can be ignored. Something I can't say is particularly prevalent in subsequent Sonic games without getting into some technical speedrunning. That's where I feel the distinction of the Sonic Adventure games is most pertinent when comparing to later 3D titles, because the design becomes much more condensed and a touch claustrophobic. It is an effort to ensure that players can't break or deviate from what the level design deliberately accounts for, which makes the games more focused. Thing is, after such a taste of the kind of freedom the Sonic Adventure games presented between the combination of their design and physics, it genuinely feels like we've had that stripped away under the assertion that it was just a bad thing to even do. The 3D Spark games say f that, and returns that freedom to the player once again. There are so rarely any invisible walls to get in the way of letting you go wherever the hell you want within reason, and sometimes completely unreasonable things. Take, for example, this one level in Protest Prison. The level design urges you towards the rocket zipline to make it further into the level. But not only is this rocket zipline skippable, there are a lot of enemies, goodies, and collectibles to hunt down along the path. However, there is one medal in this stage that is just absurd. You see that bit of geometry way in the background? That's not just background. There's a medal over there that, with a touch of skill and forethought, you can get over there and collect it. This sort of design is just straight up insane, and I love it. This game is still a massively fun romp to just play the way it looks like it should be, but the freedom and rewards you get for going off the beaten path make this game such a wild and fun game for Sonic Adventure players who like doing the same things. I get it's kinda weirdly specific, and I'm not sure I've really explained it in a way that doesn't sound like I just like breaking the game, but I'm 4 pages in on this script and I don't want to ramble on as long as I did in the first draft. I'll just conclude by saying that, despite some of my personal gripes, I love Spark 3 a lot more than I have most official Sonic games for the longest time, and I can't stress enough that if you really want to get what I mean, the best way is to just play it for yourself if you can. Right now it's only available on Steam, but the developer says he wants to get it on consoles eventually as well, and if that will sell you on trying the game, then here's hoping ports come sooner than later, because this game series deserves all the love it can get. With that all said and done, I'd like to thank everyone for watching. As always, there will be links in the description of my various social media, as well as to my Ko-fi page if you want to follow up on that. This is the Devasia mentality. Peace out.